In 1966, there was a decision made by the university to expand the clinical teaching sites, and the Austin came up as a site that could be developed into a clinical teaching facility. At the time, it was a hospital for incurables, well, it had been, but it was being opened up to taking patients of all types. And at that time, there were a number of young physicians and surgeons who were keen to teach. And so the decision was made to actually create this new clinical school. So this was in addition to the Royal Melbourne and St Vincent's, which had long been the main clinical schools of the University of Melbourne.
We had no idea how many students were going to come, and we were quite pleased. I think it was almost 20, came in November of 1967, our first group.
They would have found it to actually be very supportive of students, I imagine, with the young physicians and surgeons who'd been put in place to help with the teaching.
If you saw the hospital then and you saw it now, you wouldn't recognise it. It was fairly old. There were no research laboratories. The wards were pretty much the old Florence Nightingale wards, sort of long wards with not a lot of room for sort of individual patients.
When the students came and it became a university teaching hospital, the hospital just blossomed and grew. The clinical school was much smaller in those days, and it was much more personal, and you had a lot more contact with the students and the junior doctors. And of course it's grown over the years, but as it's grown, there are more people, more specialists.
Certainly in the early days, a lot of the teaching was conducted in second-rate facilities, although we would have regarded them as good at the time. I think the biggest difference, though, is that we've moved much more to small group, one-on-one teaching rather than larger groups. It used to be that they'd nearly only see patients lying in beds in the wards, but now they see people across all settings, patients in their homes, patients in clinics. They get to see patients participating in research studies, and indeed they get to do research studies themselves, which was not at all common 30 years ago.
For many years, the clinical school was Austin Hospital only, and then we became integrated with the Northern Hospital, and actually that provided students with the experience to go between two different hospitals. More recently, the Northern has become its own clinical school, and we've separated, so we now are back to just the Austin family again. It's been something of a journey over the years for the Austin Clinical School, but right throughout it's maintained high academic standard and the reputation of being a friendly environment for students to study.
I had very big shoes to fill. I followed Bernie Sweet, who had been the clinical dean, a much loved clinical dean for 23 years, I think. We also had a new curriculum introduced soon after I took on the job, and that was the first time that Melbourne University had used the problem-based learning technique, so I had quite a lot to do with establishing the new curriculum.
So it's an enormous privilege to be the head of the Melbourne Medical School, particularly when I trained here. The Austin is a key part of that medical school. It contributes teaching and learning, it contributes research, and it's a point of engagement with a health service that then runs into the community, which remains as important now as it was when it was inducted 50 years ago.
One of the things I find really enjoyable about working at the Austin Clinical School is how many of hospital staff are alumni of the clinical school. It's been around for 50 years. We have some really fantastic people that studied at the Austin, and I think that's a great inspiration for the students at the Austin. And in fact, most of those people are teaching our students now. It's incredibly inspiring for a student to know that one of the great clinicians or great researchers at the Austin went to the same clinical school that they're now studying at.